Rather than passing these emergency crime bills and protecting our citizens, the focus of the legislature this week has instead been on protecting themselves by making it the worst, most gerrymandered districts, by making even the worst and most gerrymandered districts in America even worse. Being worse than America is not the distinction we want for the great state of Maryland. The actions of these politicians in Annapolis this week are a perfect example of everything that's wrong with our broken political system. It's an unmitigated arrogance of power, and Marylanders are completely fed up. Last month, I accepted and submitted the fair legislative and congressional maps which were created by the Maryland Citizens Redistricting Commission. The commission was comprised of citizens free from any kind of legislative or political influence who are representative of the state's diversity and demographics. The commission held 36 open public meetings in which thousands of members of the public participated. Their focus was on fairness, transparency, and accountability, and the results was a set of maps that received a grade of A for fairness by the Princeton Gerrymandering Project. But it's been made crystal clear this week that the legislature has rigged the process and predetermined the result from the outset to ignore the commission's maps. These politicians drew their own districts in secret, behind closed doors. These terrible maps drawn by the legislature have been universally panned and have received a flunking F grade by the Princeton Project. Even Democratic Congressman Kwesi Mfume, a former president of the NAACP, called Democrats' attempts to seize control of the state's congressional representation overreach and a bridge too far. And the congressman said that it's been Baltimore that's been chopped at and bitten at in 1990 and 2000 and 2010, and here we go now again in 2020. These gerrymandered maps will be challenged in both the federal and state courts. These maps disenfranchise voters, they violate the Voting Rights Act, and they are in violation of numerous state and federal laws. On Monday, Attorney General Merrick Garland announced that the Department of Justice is suing the state of Texas in order to block its new gerrymandered congressional map. The map passed by the legislature here in Maryland is a far more egregious civil rights violation than the Texas map. And so today we're calling on the Biden administration to immediately add the state of Maryland into that lawsuit. For many years, I've been a leading advocate at the state and national level, pushing for real nonpartisan redistricting reform to allow citizens to actually pick their representatives rather than politicians picking their voters. We're here in the nation's oldest state house that served as the first capital of the United States, where we ratified the Treaty of Paris ending the Revolutionary War. American democracy literally began right here in this very place. And yet, when it comes to free and fair elections, Maryland is failing to live up to that proud legacy. This congressional map, drawn in back rooms by party bosses in Annapolis, makes a mockery of our democracy, and it's an embarrassment to all that our state stands for. And if you think these congressional maps are bad, just wait until you see what they plan to do with the legislative maps, which, as we speak, they're conspiring on in secret behind closed doors. So on behalf of all the people of Maryland who value fairness and integrity in our elections and in our political system, I am vetoing these disgracefully gerrymandered, illegal maps, which are a shameful violation of state and federal law. This is not the end of the process. This is just the beginning. The courts will be the final arbiter, not the partisan legislature. These maps cannot and will not stand. With that, I'd be happy to take a few questions.
Gerrymandering, you have been talking about this publicly for years. Can you explain why you chose not to speak directly to lawmakers during our joint hearing earlier this week?
I think the lawmakers are perfectly fully aware of what my position's been for the past 7 years. There was no reason to speak to them. Anybody else?
Governor Hogan, when it comes to the crime bills, do you really think that they're going to take them up during the special session? Or do you think they can wait and look at it?
I mean, I'm always an eternal optimist. I'm not sure that I really believe that they will, but they can. They're going to be here another day. I believe they're going to try to probably vote to override this veto, which I wanted to take the action right away rather than waiting another week because we want to be able to let the court process begin right away to overturn them, their action. But they're going to be here in session. They could very easily pass the crime bills just as quickly as they pass these terrible maps, and I'm still hopeful. But I just placed the first bet at MGM in Maryland for sports betting. If I was betting, I probably wouldn't put all the money on that.
Are you surprised that they didn't take it up?
I'm very disappointed, although not surprised. The Senate passed our bills a couple of times. House has never acted on them, and so it's frustrating. We will be bringing them back in the legislative session, and I can assure you we'll be fighting for 90 days to make sure that they get them done if they don't get them done tomorrow.
Governor, how involved are you going to be in the lawsuit? Is it going to be a state and federal combination?
I think there's going to be different federal and state actions, but they'll be taken by aggrieved citizens whose rights have been violated.
Governor, some of the Democratic lawmakers say that the maps that were approved are fair and regarding voting rights. What do you say about that?
I would say they're absolutely wrong. I mean, I don't know if we can show that map up on the wall, but they're really probably the most egregious representation of a violation of the voting rights. If you see what they did to Prince George's County and 2 districts that were created by the Voting Rights Act to create majority-minority districts, and Prince George's County's 4th congressional district carves out, winds all the way around through multiple counties into Edgewater and Davidsonville. You look at the district, instead of having a Baltimore City congressional district, which is what was originally intended and what Kwesi Mfume has been so articulate on, they take Baltimore City and spread it all around multiple districts. There's anybody that looks at the map, it takes, you don't have to be a lawyer to figure out that these are not fair maps. And they had to go to great, they're like contortionists the way they had to create these tortured maps.
Governor, you mentioned, I talked with Majority Leader King yesterday, and she said that these maps were done by lawyers and they feel can hold it in court. What do you think the prospects of?
Well, we're going to see what the courts decide. These maps were created by the same person that did the gerrymandering last time, where Martin O'Malley admitted under oath in a federal court that he did break the law. But the Supreme Court chose not to take action, and they kicked it back to the states, and this is the next step in the process.
A lot of Republicans and even more Marylanders during that hearing, they all were for the citizens map. Some people are saying it's pretty bold to throw this out there, which what they say is a ridiculous, and you say is a ridiculous idea. What are your thoughts on just kind of throwing this up there?
Well, look, the way the process works is the governor submits a set of maps to the legislature, and the legislature then takes action and votes or amends those maps. I happen to be the first Republican in the history of the state to be involved because every single 10-year cycle since 1790, when they did the first census, has been a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislature. So it's an unusual process where they weren't just getting together behind closed doors to do it together. I could have drawn maps and tried to do the same thing and been unfair and gerrymandered and drawn districts that would enable Republicans. But I didn't, because I'm very much opposed to that. So we allowed citizens to just draw fair maps that don't favor anybody, that are drawn the way they're supposed to be drawn. And for them to just ignore, basically dismiss in an arrogant way the people that spent months and months and held 36 hearings and thousands of people that participated, and say, we don't care what you want. We don't care what the people want. And in most Democrats and Republicans, it doesn't matter what party you are, people don't like this unfair process. So I think, the process is starting now. My guess is that they'll take some action tomorrow to overturn my veto. And then it will be many months before we get to the bottom of exactly what's going to happen in the next election.
Governor, it's been about 5-6 days since the state has been able to update its code.
Yes.
What's the status of the health department's websites, and has the department been subjected to some kind of a ransomware attack?
Well, it's an ongoing, investigation. I'll just say that, it was a, cyber attack that we were hit. Luckily, we have been taking some pretty serious actions over the past several years and over the past many months, and we're in a much better position than we would have been. I pushed to make sure that cyber was added into the infrastructure bill. It wasn't in the Republican bill or the Biden bill, and we got that taken care of. We've been taking actions at the state, holding cyber summits, but this is the wave of the future. People are going to be vulnerable, and whether they're state agencies or private sector companies or federal government, everybody's going to be, cyber is the #1 threat we face in America. This was our system was compromised, but at this point it appears to be much less intrusive and with a much better outcome than we were afraid might be the case. We don't believe that any data was sacrificed, and I think they're digging into it and getting to the problem of it. They made a lot of progress already, and we're hopeful it's going to be a good result.
Has this hobbled in any way the state's ability to track cases in real time?
No, it has. It slowed down some of the posting of things on websites. We're all about transparency and updating things. We have all the data still. None of the data has been compromised, and I think as of today or tomorrow, all of the postings on the websites will be back up to date. But it hasn't changed any of the data gathering or really put us in any kind of a tough position with respect to the data in our system.
Governor, those of you who are gerrymandering, would you support the legislation that's in Congress that requires states to have?
Well, I've been pushing for that for more than 20 years. And look, I think gerrymandering is a cancer on our democracy. There's no question that both parties are guilty of it, that it happens across the country. Republicans do it just as much as Democrats. I think it should be resolved at the federal level. I think the Supreme Court should have resolved the issue, but they didn't. They kicked it all back to the states. And now we are the worst, most egregious case of gerrymandering in America. It happens to be Democrats that have been in control since 1790. That's not to say that the other side isn't guilty, but just two wrongs don't make a right. And, this is not just the congressional maps, but the legislative maps, and we want to do the right thing here and lead by example. I don't like being the follower. We want to, we can't say we're not going to do it until everybody else does it. It's just nonsense.
But do you support that legislation?
I've been supporting that type of legislation for a long time. I mean, it's a little bit rich that this legislation is sponsored by, Congressman Sarbanes, who is the worst, most gerrymandered district in America, and he's not willing to fix his own district.
Governor, in Virginia, Glenn Youngkin is interested in pulling out of the regional greenhouse gas initiative, which is something you and your administration support. What's your reaction to that? Would you try to dissuade him from that?
I don't have a lot of detail I didn't hear what he said about it. I just picked up, in between meetings that he had either said something or taken some action today. I know that we have a meeting scheduled with Governor-elect Youngkin at some point over the next couple of weeks. I think he's going to come visit us here in Annapolis and sit down together. And so we're hoping to have a chance to catch up with him and what his plans are for the Commonwealth of Virginia. I know we're planning to talk about building the American Legion Bridge and fixing traffic on the Beltway and working on Chesapeake Bay issues. And, I'll probably, talk to him and find out more about what he's talking about with RGGI. But obviously we're supporting RGGI. We were encouraging other states to join RGGI. And we think, doing something about greenhouse gas emissions and clean air is pretty important. So, but I can't really speak for Governor-elect Youngkin. Thank you, guys.